Hello and welcome to another episode of the Artist Mindset Podcast. I am your host, Chris Goslow, and right now I want to talk about a topic that is near and dear to me, and certainly everything that I talk about probably qualifies as near and dear to me, but this one especially has a place in my story and history. And I think could be of value for you, hopefully, as well, and many artists and creative people out there. Tonight, my wife and I, here in Sacramento, went and saw a movie that just came out called, I think, Don't Worry, He Won't Get Too Far. I might be wrong on the title, but it's a new one with Joaquin Phoenix, Jonah Hill, and directed by Gus Van Sant. Anyway, a great movie. I highly recommend it. But this character, Joaquin Phoenix's character, ends up getting into a car crash, a drunken car crash because of his drinking problem, and he becomes a quadriplegic. And in the course of his recovery, which he does, is a very empowering movie. He discovers his calling in life as a cartoonist. And what starts out as him sketching on his sketch pad some funny little comics ends up becoming nationally syndicated cartoons or comics in national publications. Anyway, this was back in the early 80s. And that was a big deal. When you watch that, it's like, okay, props to you. You got your cartoons out there and they're kind of little squiggles. Not great illustrations, but funny, and sort of because of their simplicity, there's a great appeal, and I've certainly seen things like that in magazines and things. So anyway, numerous times during the movie, this character has to deal with criticism from people who don't like his comics. In fact, the college where he first is featured, apparently the editors, they tell him that they've gotten 55 complaint letters from people about the comics. And in that same conversation, they talk about the publisher of Gary Larson's comics wanting to hire him. So at the same time as he's being rejected by all these people, he's getting hired and going up the next step in his career. And every time that people come up to him or he hears about criticism, he just kind of laughs it off. And this is what I wanted to talk about right now. Because that right there is exactly what is needed for all the folks out there, and I include myself in this because I know from firsthand experience what this is like. Everybody who is sensitive to criticism, it is so important that we can learn to overcome that sensitivity and press on and believe in ourselves, regardless of what a few people say. Because needless to say, while this is just one story, and it is based on a true story, by the way, it is one example of what I think the elements of success require, and they require belief in yourself. There's a book I was reading a while ago, Guerilla Marketing. I forgot the guy who wrote it, but the original author of the idea of guerrilla marketing, do it yourself, DIY marketing. It was a book from the 80s, and I think I got it at a garage sale. I still have it. And he was talking about, I think he said a prerequisite of success in marketing is, I think he called it ego strength. And what he was talking about is a similar quality, the quality of confidence in yourself that you can press on in the face of adversity and not get too messed up over it. Okay, now as a creative artist, we tend to be very sensitive, and I'm sure there are many successful artists who are not as thick-skinned and is easily brushing things off as the character in this movie, but who still find a way through it. You don't have to be that Teflon man about it. Whenever I meet someone who is just kind of a Teflon about it, that's what I call it, and, any comments from someone else, they just brush off them, it is amazing to me. And I admire such people. And I admire the person in this movie, too, the character. And I think that there's an ingredient there. You have to be able to keep going forward in the face of criticism or disagreement or people not getting you. There's a great book by Wayne Dyer called Your Erroneous Zones, where the first book he got famous with it back in the 70s. And he talks about this fact that, in life, half the people are going to disagree with you, and you better get used to it. And if they love you, they're going to disagree with you half the time. And he points out very astutely that in a presidential election, if you get over half of the people, just half, slightly over half the people to agree with you, then you win. And if you get a few percentage points over half, then you got a landslide. And we're not talking about 80%. We're not talking about 70% or 60%. It could be 55 or something like that. It's an illusion to think that everyone around us is going to get us, agree with us, or like what we're doing. And I'm saying this with full humility as I acknowledge that even I have struggled with this at times. And sometimes I wonder if if teaching was not a great way for someone like me who was very sensitive to people's criticism to find a niche that was safer somehow than putting my own art out there and risking the criticism. Now I don't say that lightly, and because I feel that it feels kind of embarrassing to say that, like it makes me look bad or something. But the truth is I've struggled with this too, so I know how much time you can waste or how much effort you can waste on this. I mean, actually, here's the truth. My story, I was paralyzed by the fear of criticism from before I even knew what was going on. I would say by the time I was 7, 8 in grade school, it was already had me firmly in its grip. So I cannot honestly say that I've really ever lived without this. I've been dealing with this my whole life, and I can tell you it has never led to joy, happiness, success, or much of anything good. The over fear of criticism can cause you to hide, to not share who you are, to not go for things you want, and to make up stories as a consequence that leave you alone, unsuccessful, unfulfilled, lonely, and just generally dissatisfied. So I know of which I speak. If nothing else, I have become an expert in exploring the world of being afraid of criticism and what that can do to a person. However, the good news is, like everybody I imagine listening to this podcast, I am learning and I am growing, and as are you. And that is what I think is one of the beauties of life, is that we can learn and grow. Case in point, me doing this podcast does represent a victory over some past where I didn't do it. So, in life, I think it's so important to acknowledge and take the steps you can take. You may not be able to always take the big, huge steps. In this movie, it just represents, I think, what I love about the movie, the portion of the movie I'm describing, is it really does represent, I think, complete mastery over this issue. But some of us have to kind of work with the baby steps that we can work with to keep going forward and gingerly going forward. It's no accident, I believe, that this cartoonist ended up in national magazines, because with that kind of attitude, it wasn't just the creativity. The creativity was there, but the kind of what we call that thick-skinned, or just not really minding if people thought it was, they didn't like it, and not letting that stop him. That is so important. People often talk about the importance of ambition, believing in yourself, confidence, visioning, all these other things, desire. But what about the power of simply not getting freaked out if other people don't approve? That right there could be one of the the understudied qualities of successful people. And I'm sure that is the case for artists. If you look at, many artists out there, it's not just that they're gung-ho and ambitious. It could be that they just simply don't get freaked out if other people are not always approving of what they do, especially given the nature of being an artist. I remember one artist mentor I worked with a long time ago. He said that as an artist, what you do is you interrupt people, and by which he meant that you interrupt their day with something unexpected. It could be this cartoon, the cartoonist I was talking about, a little comic. It could be a song on the radio. It could be a music video, a painting, a movie, poetry, a book. You interrupt the normal life that whatever people are already experiencing. And he put it in that point, from that point of view. And I think that is very interesting and related to this. That interruption may not always be appreciated right away. Clearly, artists throughout the ages have been, interrupters that have not always been greeted with joy from the people they interrupted. So that is just kind of comes with the territory, is what I'm saying. And I guess what I'm saying here is, even if it is hard for you, and believe me, I understand how hard it is, how hard it can be to just deal with criticism. If you're like me and have had an issue with that, you can take small steps. You can grow in confidence. You can grow in your thick-skinned. Grow in that quality. You really, all it is a perspective. I think that for myself, one of the reasons that this afflicted me so much was because of how badly I felt disapproved of in my own life as a child. Just through no intentional neglect or problems with my family. It was just a few experiences that I had as a child where I felt grossly disapproved of, and that internalized in me a very thin skin that was very, very, I was always just one little comment away, I guess, from feeling like I would just, I don't know, like blow away in the wind or something. And that was just the story I made up and sort of the identity that I created out of my own, childhood survival strategies. It's, what am I saying here? We have stories, we have reasons for why we have whatever limitations are there in front of us. But at the end of the day, these limitations represent a perspective. And let's say a perspective that's lacking, something critical in it. Maybe a perspective that is, not kind enough to ourselves. It doesn't see the whole picture. It's a limited perspective. And when you grow up with a limited perspective, you can exaggerate certain things or have a distorted view of how things are going to be. And I think the fear of criticism is one such distorted view. And that the remedy to that is to put yourself out there, even if in a small way, and challenge that sort of, hiding defense mechanism. I was thinking the word cowardly, but I didn't want to say that because it just always is so derogatory. It's not that, it may feel cowardly, but there's so much judgment around that word. It's not really that, is it? No, it's just if you've been afflicted by this, it's just that deep sense of shame that you fear could be activated if someone else, finds out the truth that you're not perfect. And any comment could represent them knowing, or so you think. Whatever your mind does with it, we can challenge these notions. We can grow in confidence. We can grow in resilience. Resilience is the key here. And resilience is not always instantaneous. Some people are blessed with it, and God bless them, And for some of us, we have to grow in it. Sometimes we need a pep talk. That's what I was hoping that this will be. A pep talk to challenge those fears and grow in your own resilience, because your art may depend upon it. Your ability to share your vision and put forth into the world what makes you unique as an artist and express that may depend upon you getting out of your own way and fighting through whatever is there as you face, the uncertainty of life, the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, to quote Shakespeare, and face whatever may be there, and then go forth and say, I am not going to stop. To quote The Greatest Showman, this is me. And that this is me attitude, I think, is critical for success in the arts. And when I say success, it could be as simple as simply hanging up your paintings or having them shown. And it could also mean great fame and fortune. But to accomplish your goals as an artist, it's going to take that form of resilience. Because really, think about it. Did we go into the arts just to please people? Or just to feel good about ourselves? Maybe we have a vision that needs to be seen. How many pieces of art out there have made a big impact because they caused a scandal, or they were considered ugly or problematic, or somehow were problematic for people? Obviously, so many examples, more so than not, of art of that type. And even if your art is not per se controversial, it still may run into approval or disapproval along the way to its growth. It could be a family member, it could be an agent or a business, a venue, a unhappy fan, or a hater. Haters are a part of life, and that's what I'm trying to say here. And I'm saying again, I'm with you. I understand the challenge around this. I'm right there with you. But we were put on this earth for a reason, and our art was given to us for a reason. Let's do what it takes to pull ourselves up and pull ourselves through whatever challenges come in front of us. I think this is a very important one to face. So I hope this discussion is helpful, and I hope that you can find clarity and empowerment in this area as I seek to as well. Let's take the journey together. Being an artist is an awesome thing, and let's just go out and let ourselves live and celebrate who we are. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Artist Mindset Podcast. God bless.